What's up everyone, and welcome to a new series called Forgotten Classics. Here I'm going to be travelling back to look at games that were heralded as some of the best of their generation when they were released, but over time have slowly been forgotten into obscurity. Today we're going to be looking at Eternal Darkness, a horror game developed by Silicon Knights for the Nintendo GameCube back in 2002. This was one of my favourite titles for the console, combining great storytelling with a larger focus on psychological horror, rather than the jump scares and gore that were prevalent for that generation. The game revolves around Alex Roivas, a young woman who comes to find out that her grandfather has been brutally murdered in his creepy mansion in the middle of nowhere. Classic horror story beginnings, right? With the police at a loss for leads on who, or what, has killed the old man, Alex takes it upon herself to explore the mansion in an effort to find clues on any enemies her grandfather had, to bring her closer to finding his killer. This brings her to find the Tome of Eternal Darkness, a disgusting, evil book that tells the story of all who come into contact with it and their fates. Through reading the book, Alec learns of the beginnings of an order of evil, starting in 26 BC, when a Roman military general comes into contact with an ominous artifact which ultimately corrupts him, sending on a sequence of events throughout time. You play as a multitude of characters in the story, ranging from an Indiana Jones-esque adventurer in Cambodia, a monk in France, colonial Americans in the States, an Italian architect in Persia, and more. The mansion acts almost as a hub where Alex solves various puzzles to find the next chapter pages and fleshes out more of the history of the tome. Each story is dark, twisted, and often sees characters visiting the same locales hundreds of years apart. This helps when you know how to solve a puzzle you've seen before, but also means you know what darkness awaits you as you delve deeper into the settings. The gameplay itself was varied. Puzzle solving was a main feature, as well as avoiding various traps and pitfalls in some of the more exotic locations. The combat, though, was fairly unique for its time. All the weapons were specific for the area and time period, meaning you could never rely on a type of sword or gun from one story to the next. You could aim at specific body parts to maim or slow enemies, or simply chop off their heads to make them blind to your whereabouts. This became more difficult, of course, when the enemies have more than one head. Once you've acquired the tome as each character, you're also able to use magic, spelled with a K, to boost your defenses, attack power, repel enemies, or find hidden secrets. All of these spells can be boosted with various runes you find as you progress through the game, which operated on a rock, paper, scissors method, with each colour of spell being strong to one and weak to another. The big draw to the game at the time, and biggest marketing point, was the Sanity Meter. This was a green meter that depleted as you came into contact with things that affected your sanity, for example, monsters. This has since been used in games like the Amnesia series, however Eternal Darkness still stands at the top when it comes to the effects of low sanity. Losing a bit of your green meter would result in things like hearing babies crying or blood dripping from the walls. The camera would skew off center, or your controls would invert mid-battle. Lose even more? You might walk into a room when suddenly your head would just explode, only for you to wake up and repeat the last few seconds. Your character might turn to you and put a bullet straight into the camera. The game would also mess with your head in the real world, telling you your controller was unplugged, or your memory card was corrupted, trying to delete your saved games, or just plain giving you a blue screen of death. When you're invested in a game, checking every corner for the next zombie to jump out, these things take you by surprise and really mess with your head. Each character had different levels of sanity, health, and magic. A well-educated monk would have high proficiency in using magic, but not very much stamina or health, while a soldier who had already seen the horrors of war would have high sanity tolerance. This meant each new chapter required a different approach to the challenges ahead, with some more combat orientated, while others a lot more thought based. At the time of its release, the game received a great reception, with many reviewers applauding the story, the varied effects of the sanity system, and the varied content throughout. It was nominated for, and won, a number of awards. However, it did not sell well. Only 500,000 copies were sold worldwide, as many people avoided an unknown franchise. The fact the game was originally destined for the N64, Nintendo's console from the previous generation, was telling, as its graphics failed to live up to other horror ventures like the reboot of the Resident Evil series. A sequel was mooted, but lawsuits and other issues caused Silicon Knights to go bankrupt, so any plans were shelved. The game has held a cult following since then, but on the wild scale of gaming, many people aren't even aware of its existence. The original game's writer and director, Dennis Dyack, has been pushing for a sequel, and despite a number of failed Kickstarter campaigns, has managed to go to work on a game he calls a spiritual successor, titled Shadow of the Eternals. There is a teaser trailer, gameplay, and a promise to keep working on it. It's been quiet for a while, but this could be the closest we get to seeing any more gameplay akin to the original, Or so we thought. As recently as November of 2017, Nintendo extended the license of the Eternal Darkness franchise. Could this mean a sequel is in the works? An upload of the original to the promised retro gaming streaming service on the Switch? Maybe even an updated remastered version? Only time will tell. For now, I leave you with this. Despite being over 15 years old and looking slightly older, Eternal Darkness is one of the most engrossing horror stories you'll ever experience, and the effects of the Sanity system will remain lodged in your brain. Its small cult following doesn't do it justice, so I definitely recommend checking this classic out.